Right now, we have a blueprint for success. This is going to focus on the key elements of implementing effective patient engagement programs. We've got a couple of folks joining us up on stage. And we've got, let's see here, we've got Josh Konetsny, the Senior Vice President of Business Development, Momentum Life Sciences. We have several panelists. We have Jenna Phillips, who's the VP of Business Development at Momentum. We have Naveed Masood, who is the head of U.S. Patient Services and Launch Lead at Servier, and Jennifer Lichtman, who is the Vice President of Market Access and Patient Services at Acadia. Welcome, group. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Sounds like you can. Great. First of all, thank you to Informa for continuing to have this conference at the Estancia Hotel in San Diego. It's a wonderful location. I hope we can all attest to that. So we are very excited to be here with the group we have. We're going to do introductions in a second. Momentum Life Sciences, we came to this conference and with this topic thinking, we don't hear a lot about the actual implementation of patient support programs. And we thought that there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about how to set these programs up the right way for patients, for other aspects of the ecosystem, HCPs, so on and so forth, and for the us pharma companies as well to make sure these programs are set up the right way. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the best practices, some of the things that we've seen, all of us here, as we've implemented these programs. So hoping you're going to walk away from this with some extra learnings. And of course, we'll do questions at the end. So please feel free to ask questions. We'll leave a few minutes open for that. Just a quick introduction. My name is Josh Konetsny. I'm a Senior Vice President of our Business Development for Momentum Life Sciences. Our organization focuses on patient and HCP programs. Our goal is always the patient first, to make sure patients are able to get access to help them get on and help them stay on therapy. We do that through human and digital interactions with those patients and HCPs. So again, thank you for having us. I'm going to pass it over to Jenna.
Awesome. I forgot I was mic'd up. I was about to grab the mic. My name is Jenna Phillips. I lead sales and partnership with Josh at Momentum and was at Authentics the last 4 years. So you may recognize me from there and be like, where did she go? So brand new to the Momentum team and really excited to be here and share with you all again. I think this is my third or fourth time at this conference. And yeah, it's always great to come back to San Diego.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Naveed Masood. Glad to be here with you all. It's my third year here, so different topics every year, but exciting to hear about some of the digital transformative programs that are going on. I'm the head of U.S. Patient Services at Servier Pharmaceuticals. It's our U.S. affiliate. I'm responsible for all our different therapeutic areas, particularly hematologic malignancies and solid tumors. And I'll speak to you as well tomorrow, but today I'm looking forward to having a very engaging discussion with you all.
And hey everybody, I'm Jennifer Lichtman, and I lead all facets of market access and patient support services at Acadia Pharmaceuticals. But for all intents and purposes, for this conversation, we'll focus on patient support as well as distribution and how we've pulled off some really, really great best-in-class programs in those areas. And I work across two therapeutic areas today. One is Nuplazid, which is indicated for Parkinson's disease psychosis, as well as our second product, Daybue, which is actually a rare product for the treatment of Rett syndrome. So really excited to be here this morning. Thanks for your engagement, your questions, and looking forward to a robust conversation.
Awesome. Hey, we got some superstars up here, so really excited about this. So we're going to focus on three main topics. We'll ask some questions and have some answers. We're going to look at strategic planning and design. We're going to look at the integration of technology and human touch points, and then really look at continuous evaluation, adaptation. How do we make sure we're setting these programs up for success? So my first question for you all, and Jennifer, I'll pick on you if you don't mind. So when you think about patient engagement programs, what do you think is that single most overlooked aspect of what can impact long-term success?
Sure. So a few things. First of all, the patient themselves. So making sure that the patient is always at the core, always at the center, and that you're building out from there, truly understanding their needs, the demographic, what is the customer telling us, and how do we build our programs to best support that individual? Because at the end of the day, everything that we do is about helping patients successfully start and successfully stay on therapy. And if you build your program with those principles in mind, you're going to be successful. I think secondly, and this has been a pitfall, and I tell my team all the time, please don't implement anything unless you can measure the success, right? So defining upfront, what does success look like? And more importantly, how are we going to measure that success? I can't tell you how many times we've executed programs or tools or initiatives and then have scrambled to figure out, wait a second, is this actually delivering the result that we want? So make sure, again, that you can monitor and measure the success that you're looking for. And then finally, I would say just how critical it is to gather insights, particularly when you're first launching a product or first launching a program. You want to understand how the market is reacting to that and be able to pivot, right, depending on what the market is telling us we need to do. But you can't do that unless you're collecting the data and the insights that you need to truly understand. And yet again, that has been a pitfall where we've launched something and then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a second, we want to know about this, and we want to know about this, and we want to know about this. And then we're scrambling to figure out, okay, how can we collect it? And then once we can collect it, how do we play catch up? Because we've missed all this time without collecting it. So the data and the insights, making sure that you're aligned internally and with your partners and your teams on what we want and need to know about the market up front.
Thank you.
I would say, I'm going to kind of piggyback on your KPI component is some of the softer KPIs as well. Like generally you have your access and adherence goals and you have those kind of company-wide KPIs, but what are the KPIs that are going to tell you before then that your program is successful and leading to where you want it to? But since being at Momentum, one of the biggest things that I've seen too is what is the relationship the patient has with the provider like? I think that is something that is missed often. Is this something that, are they seeing their provider weekly, monthly, or is it like every 6 months? Does the provider have, is this similar to a lot of other things that they're prescribing? So is the patient going to be getting the education, the support that they need on a frequent enough basis there, or what does that look like? And I think that can play a big factor in how you design.
Thanks, Jenna. Navi, any thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you look at the KPIs, Jenna, like we want to make sure that we focus on some of the leading indicators as well as the lagging indicators. So one of the things that we had done most recently in August of 2024, we were responsible for the launch of a new therapeutic option for IDH1, IDH2 low-grade glioma, which is a type of brain tumor. We're the first in this space. There's been over 25 years without any innovation in this area. So we really focused along the patient journey. And we hear this patient journey often and we talk about, hey, what are the barriers or drivers? What are the moments that matter? But you can actually carefully identify KPIs within that journey. So for example, even pre-launch, we developed significant KPIs around disease state awareness. So how many patients were we touching without the brand approval on DSC, which is disease state education. And then at approval, we had worked very closely with the advocacy organizations and the specialty pharmacies to, again, identify and accelerate how we educated them as well. And then on the infusion side, you also can do things around training. Another thing that we had done around a leading indicator as well was ensuring that our HCPs and their offices, I've heard statistics up to like 70% of the time, patients still learn about PSP from their HCPs. So the ability to educate those HCPs about the services, tools, and resources are really clearly the leading indicators. And then going back to what Jennifer was saying, you want to be able to pivot as well. around some of the approval post-launch KPIs, such as adherence rate, things like time to first fill, enrollment into the program. Last but not least, one of the things that we look at very carefully is we are not determining, and I think there's a really good topic later on today about gross to net and measuring that and balancing those KPIs. It's important for a patient support program to be a strategic function. So as you're building out these KPIs, whether they're leading or lagging, to understand that it's not just the gross to net impact, but there's also tools and resources that you can provide that patients can download either digitally or print versions to help them better understand and navigate their journey more effectively. So we look at it that way.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I just want to ask, go a little deeper, Naveed. So how much of that during implementation were you coming up with versus what you were learning afterwards?
Sure, and if I was to be quite honest here, which I certainly will, I would say that there are learnings that were established post-approval. So we did as much research as we could with the patient communities that were relevant. However, we recognize that, and for those of you who are launching new indications or new products, molecular entities, I think it's important to not overcorrect things. So as you look at your KPIs, a lot of those KPIs will be still relevant. However, it's the cadence in which you report them. If you start looking at your PAP percentage or your copay utilization on a weekly basis, you might find yourself in this pitfall of overcorrecting. Sometimes you need to let things stay its course before you can determine. And then I liked what was stated earlier about making sure, I think it was the panel before that talked about, you know, the qualitative patient satisfaction with using those tools and resources and how well embedded they are.
That's great. Thank you, Naveed. And Jennifer, if I can ask you on the KPI front, you're saying how you're making sure your team is coming forward with what those KPIs. How are we going to measure these programs? How much does that change? You know, from when they're planning from an implementation standpoint to kind of now we're in market.
Yeah. I think I'll go back to what I originally said, which is all roads lead back to helping patients successfully start and successfully stay on therapy. And so that means that early on you want to establish what are our conversion goals, fulfillment goals, whatever you guys call it, right? But converting a prescription into a new patient start, what should those goals look like, and what type of improvement on our original goal do we want to see over time? And same with persistency or adherence. You know, what does good look like when we benchmark, when we think of our own product, of our own patient demographic? What does good look like for persistency now? But as we continue to offer more support, learn more about the patients and their needs and how we can better support them through their journey, what would we want persistency to look like 6 months from now, 9 months from now, a year from now? And then finally, I would say the customer satisfaction, which others have mentioned, but really being able to measure both from a patient perspective as well as from an HCP perspective, how are they responding to our services, what's working, what isn't, and ultimately how satisfied are they? I think are all measures that you start with, but you continue with modifying and updating and reiterating as you go through your launch.
That's great, thank you. I mean, like you said, all roads lead back to the patient. Certainly Acadia has that mission, no doubt. Thank you for that. So I want to ask about, we're going to kind of get into the strategic planning and design aspect of it. The patient journey, we all use that phrase quite a bit. It's an important one, but it's also about the journey is different for different people, for different patients. One of the obvious ways of looking at that is a newly diagnosed patient versus a patient who has been struggling with the disease, maybe treating, maybe failing in a variety of ways. How do we look at implementation in order to kind of best personalize that experience for patients? Who would like to go?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
up to you guys.
I can certainly start, and then I think we talked about this already, you and I, earlier. I'll just say that it's definitely a great question, and I'll even add another layer of complexity to it.
Please.
Patients that are incident versus prevalent. So you also see different journeys based on that. One of the things that I think it goes back to is going back to patient segmentation, right? And trying to better understand that every patient needs to be individualized, and the approach you take is a personalized one where you actually look at patients that might, and in the world of oncology, I will tell you many of these patients actually struggle with comorbidities. And those comorbidities can actually affect many things along their journey. So for example, if you're a relapse patient, chances are you might be a little older for certain therapeutic indications, which would mean that you might have some different challenges around medication reminders and the ability to take your medication not only on time, but in a compliant way. So I think you have the best chance of capturing this in two ways. Number one, it's really going through the journey again and identifying the barriers and drivers. But it goes back to one of the things that we have committed to doing is understanding the nature of the disease. So the disease state, what are some common comorbidities? What are some medications that they have to take with that disease? And also, from an organizational goal alignment, is what are our goals as an organization in terms of line extensions? What are some things we're bringing forth, whether it's a different dose strength and things like that? So I think you have to really look at it that way. And we can really spend some time talking about pediatric indications and sort of falling into that. But I feel like that's kind of the way that I would look at that, again, going back to the barriers and drivers.
Yeah, thank you for that, Naveed.
Yeah.
Jennifer?
Sure. So, and I'll answer it maybe a little differently or take a different approach to the response. And I think first and foremost, agree we need to understand our patient, the demographic, and what they're dealing with within their disease state. And it's not just the disease that our product treats, but everything else that's going on with them medically, clinically, their social, everything that's happening within their life, to truly understand that, and again, build the program around supporting that. Looking at the market research and capitalizing on that, really listening to the voice of the customer. And I know that this is different with every pharma company, but at my company, I can actually go out and engage with patients, right? For my rare product, I can actually meet with patients, in their home, if that's what they desire, see how they live, talk to them in their own environment, meet them out in conferences or at community events. And so that's so important. It's so easy for us to just get stuck in our office in the day-to-day humdrum of everything that we're doing, but getting out and actually meeting the patients, engaging with the patients, talking to their caregivers, that's where you get the best insights and can ultimately build the best program.
That's great. Like a perfect thing to do before you're actually launching the program, and a perfect thing to do as you are continuing with the program. That's great. Thank you, Jennifer. Jenna, your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple things I would add is when you decide how you're going to segment the patients, where are you going to get that data? So is your specialty pharmacy going to provide it? Is the patient going to have to provide it themselves? Do you need to ask these questions? Have they been a part of a patient support program before? Do they know what this is like? Have they been on this therapy before, a similar therapy? What's their day-to-day schedule like? And, is this a change to their life, a dramatic change to their life or not? And understanding those questions. So where are you going to get that data? And then the second piece is, for the people that you are going to have talking to the patients, so the agents or the nurses or whomever you're going to have talk to the patients, are you going to require them to follow a script or not? Because if you are, I think that requires a lot more journeys that you kind of have to map out then, where if you're going to give them a little more freedom to have conversations, connect with the patient in a different way, then you may not have to get as prescriptive on the journeys because of those scripts.
Yeah, and just to tag along with that, at Momentum, we work with many different pharma programs, so we get to see a wide swath of what's going on. One of the things we put a lot of time into is this personalization up front. So we are obviously going to be looking at different segmentations of patients. The thing is, it goes a lot deeper than that. We're going to learn as the program goes as well. So what we learned at implementation is not always what happens 6 months after you've launched. And just like you were saying, Jenna, our organization, we use call guides. It's such an important thing. It's like we don't want to script this. We really want to connect with the patients, just like Jennifer was saying, just getting to know these patients. We understand they have lives outside of their disease, obviously. That connection is so unbelievably crucial. But again, you don't learn all this stuff in implementation. Some of it you're going to have to learn as time goes on. So.
Yeah. And can I capitalize on that just really quick? Because
would love it. Yeah,
I think that's a great point, is going into the build and execution of any program with the mentality up front of, I know I'm going to have to change and pivot, like no matter what, right? Don't let it catch you off guard, because no matter what, it's going to happen. And if it catches you off guard, that's when you're scrambling and trying to catch up and fix something. So go into it knowing, hey, we're building a program, or I'm building a program that is customizable and flexible as we learn more about our marketplace, but simultaneously it's scalable. So I'm building this fit for now, but ready for the future, right? And any growth that's to come.
And sharing that with your internal partners and compliance, et cetera, that we might be pivoting. This is what it could look like early and often.
It's like, yeah, it's like a part of our setup process is like, okay, we're gonna just talk about what's gonna go wrong, right?
Yeah.
And then how are we gonna deal with that? So it's a great point. All right, we're talking about what's going wrong. I'm sorry to keep it pessimistic, but this is important for everyone. This is important. So where have you seen these planning efforts go wrong? Like any kind of tidbits, best practices we can point out to the audience here.
Sure. Well, yeah, absolutely. So I know that we always want to do that like post-mortem, and we've been doing that pretty aggressively with our most recent launch. Going back to Jenna's question, is where I have seen things go wrong was the lack of unification within our ecosystem. So your point earlier was around inpatient services, and even within access, you have so many different vendors. You're dealing with specialty pharmacies, you're dealing with distributors, you're dealing with a copay program, you're dealing with a different hub. And if you have multiple products within the portfolio, now you're dealing with multiple hubs, potentially multiple copay vendors, and then you're trying to synchronize that data. Because if you don't have data that's synchronized, what ends up happening is you can jeopardize the patient care and the patient experience. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. We know with copay law, for example, that you can only do a maximum per year. So what ends up happening for more specialty products that are a little bit more expensive, some patients don't qualify for copay after they've reached their limit. So what happens to these patients? What happens to their continuation of therapy? If you don't have a cohesion between the different vendors and the right handoff points, you can actually jeopardize that patient's ability to continue to receive that best patient outcome. So I think that data synchronization in the most compliant way is critical to success. And sometimes, Josh, that is compromised when you don't have kind of the left hand and the right hand talking to one another and you don't have the appropriate handoffs for patients.
Yeah.
And
So
Naveed, when we were talking earlier, sorry, Josh.
no. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's the data and it's the minds together, right? Like getting all those groups in a room. Monitoring for the last 4 years, so many patient support programs, I've seen in those implementations where people get the hub, the specialty pharmacy, the monitoring tool, the nurse navigator program, all these different groups together in a room, and it's just around like alignment to our goals, that like feeling like you're one team. And when people don't do that at the beginning phase, in addition to the data, both sides, you see that go wrong.
And may I just say one additional thing to add? For those of you who are are connected to the patient advocacy organizations, I think that's also another huge entity that needs to be involved in this sort of ecosystem that I think in patient services previously at some of the organizations we lacked that. At Servier, we do it well, but I still think there's room to integrate that patient voice via the advocacy organizations because they can really share with you details around that journey because they have data that you're talking about, Jenna.
Yeah.
That's a great call out. Yeah, thank you. Jennifer, thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'm a people person. I'm a relationship person. And first and foremost, when I'm choosing my partners internally or externally, I choose partners based on, are we going to have a good relationship? Are we going to be good strategic partners? And when the blank hits the fan, are we going to be able to get through it together and be solution oriented, act quickly, support each other, and get through whatever needs to be gotten through. So I would say, focus on the partnership and the relationship when choosing your vendors, in the first place. But secondly, can the partner? It's really not just do the partners have the capabilities, the services, the processes. To me, it boils down to, do they have the operational wherewithal to fix things when they go wrong, like getting into a backlog? How many people have gotten into backlog many, many times in their career? Unfortunately, I have, and it happens. Sometimes we get in a backlog, but how are we going to fix it, and how are we going to fix it quickly, right? And does my partner and do the people on my own team have the operational wherewithal to build out a program from a people, process, technology perspective to make sure that we either avoid the backlog, situation altogether, or if it does happen, we've got the scalability and the wherewithal to fix it super quick. And the backlog's just one example of many things that can go wrong. But again, your partners need to be operationally sound, and you and your own team. I wouldn't just trust, they've got this. We need to understand the ins and outs of the program, the SOPs, how you're engaging, with the patients and HCPs. How does your technology work? What happens if there's a mishap? And really, really dig in operationally to avoid a lot of the pitfalls.
So you've got, so if I can sum this up, so the pitfalls that we want to try to avoid is planning ahead of time. It's bringing partners together, not just once, right? Setting the right expectations for those partners, building relationships. And then, Jennifer, like you're saying, just picking the right partner, picking the partner that's going to work for you, that's going to be there when those pitfalls do happen. So that was great. Thank you.
Hey, Josh, one thing as well, I would just encourage, one of the things that we found to be helpful is to continue to challenge the status quo in terms of so anybody designing the business rules and the SOPs, you often go to what you're potentially comfortable doing. But when you look at FPLs and you look at your hardship programs and things like that, every disease state can potentially present different type of demographics, different type of payers. You could have a different mix between government and commercial. So I think it's very important to if you have an FPL and you're finding that this is not meeting patients where they are and giving them that access, challenge that and work obviously with your legal and compliance partners to do it. But I wouldn't just accept things because they're an industry standard. I would say look at your patients' unique demographics as well.
I was going to add on the what could go wrong that Jennifer was talking about. It's playing those out beforehand. You don't want to be the pessimist and talk about the things that go wrong, but you do in a launch before you launch, right? Yeah. You want to talk about those and think, okay, how does that happen? And talk about that with the people who are going to be on the phones with patients. Do they know when this happens, this is their response? Do they have those backup plans? And then have they actually met patients before it's go time, right? We spend a lot of time, I think pharma organizations spend a lot of time, in focus groups with patients, but are they bringing those with the team that's going to be on the phone? Are they getting to spend time with patients? Into role play then after that before they're live and going.
Yeah, those are great points. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks. All right, so on to a less pessimistic topic. It was a critical one though. So talk a bit about the integration of technology and human support when it comes to supporting patients. So I want to ask you guys what that right blend is between digital and human. This is, frankly, as we were preparing, this seemed like the question that we had the most fun with. So who would like to start?
Naveed or me?
Jennifer, you want to start?
Well, I'm happy to kick us off. So it's certainly an art and not a science, I guess. I'll start with saying that.
No
and
doubt.
it really depends on the patient demographic and the therapeutic area that you're working in, first and foremost. And for example, I work in two very different patient demographics. One is more of an elderly population that's suffering from psychosis, Parkinson's disease-related psychosis. So they're having delusions and hallucinations. And these are people that are very elderly, where you've got caregivers that are probably in their 60s, maybe even 70s, that are taking care of their parents. And then I've got another therapeutic area that is rare, pediatric, young girls mostly, the very complex therapeutic area, very sick children, and their parents that are typically their caregivers are in their 30s, 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, right, taking care of these kids. And so taking a look at the needs of the different areas is kind of the first, I think, approach to where do you need humans and where do you need digital. And for me, I have chosen the human approach over digital. That's not to say I don't have a lot of digital things going on within my programs, as well as automation and things like that. But when it comes to interfacing with the patients, the caregivers, the families, I've chosen time and time again to take the more human approach. Now, interestingly, with Rett, this is the rare disease, one of the things that we've learned over time is that the caregivers, they're so overwhelmed, they're so swamped, they can't keep track of this, that, the other thing, and we're calling them a lot, and there's different people calling them. You've got the hub and the SP and the field access manager. I mean, there's so many people calling on them, and they said, hey, if I just had like one place digitally that wherever I am, in the community, at work, with friends, at home, one place where I can just communicate with you and have it just on my phone, that would be amazing, right? And so we pivoted, going back to the pivot conversation, and said, okay, what kind of, e-tool can we put in place to help enable that, on the caregiver's phone? So again, an example of where we've taken such a human approach, but now we're being asked, hey, the digital could actually help, and needing to pivot in that direction. And now I have a nice mix of both, right, where we've got the human and the digital engagement. But again, really understanding up front what the needs are going to be and who your audience is. And number two, being able to pivot when you learn more and your patients are asking you to do so.
Well said. Thank you. So Jennifer, you came at it from a little more of the human side, but then obviously you pivoted where needed. Naveed, what's your experience here?
I couldn't agree anymore with what Jennifer said about the approach and the uniqueness of the disease state. I mean, I'll just use an example right here. I mean, if you just look around the audience here, I got to believe over 90% of the people in this audience have already touched their cell phone at least 20 times during the meeting. Okay, and that's no that's not saying
when
that
you were speaking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess what I'd like to say is it's very important to go back to the socio demographic of the patients, right? So one of the things that we recently launched was for this brain tumor drug that we got approved. The average age of the patient is around 38 years old. So not to say that older patients don't use digital technology as much, but one of the things we did was we surveyed the patients to better understand how many times a day they touch their phone, what kind of things they use, what kind of apps they use, what kind of challenge. For an oral oncolytic, it might be different than for an infusion. So what I'd like to just emphasize here is that when you're building out an app to understand our digital technology, to understand, do you have the right balance? So if you go back to the human touch that you were talking about, Jennifer, yes, there are patients that want the human touch, but what I'd like to just stress here is that you can actually do both. You can actually have these apps, and I'll give you the example for the one we have on brain tumor. You can actually have them log in to an app or sign up for an app, and then you can ask personalized questions. And I think those personalized questions allow you to get to that human touch so you better understand, hey, do they need medication reminders? Do they need to do like a health and wellness check that day? And then furthermore, if we could just go back to the beginning of the discussion, is it's very important to establish those KPIs, because what you don't want to do is invest in a tool or technology that's just being underutilized or unused. So you can do that with these apps, understand the number of downloads, how often they stay on a certain on a certain page or a certain, certain module of the app. So I think it's important to ensure that you understand the demographics, also understanding the geographical component, because patients that are in urban areas versus rural areas are different and they have different needs. And then going further, if I could be more specific, is education as well. So we talk a little bit about age, but there's also education of the patients. There's access to both either community or academic facilities that I think you'd want to take into account.
A lot of times we think about how you kind of personalize can be done easier with like a human support, right, than a digital support. When we were talking earlier, Naveed, what I thought was really interesting about your app is how you guys learn from the app to then serve up the right content based on what your learnings are. Can you talk a little bit around how you're adaptive from that standpoint?
Absolutely. And I could touch upon, like, so we're 1 year into the launch, right? So 1 year after the launch, we have, and to give you a real life example, because what I shared with you earlier, we had 25 years with really no innovation in this area. So what happened at approval, we had what we call pent-up demand for this drug. So a lot of the onboarding new patient starts were with the prevalent patients. So you get these patients aware, you do some of the DSC work, you get them signed up for the app. But guess what? The ongoing, as you kind of change the versions and you enhance the versions, patients are 1 year into the drug. Maybe they're starting to think about having families, they start thinking about drug holidays, fertility concerns, financial toxicity. So then the app needs to be able to be responsive enough to know that the change in a patient that's been on the drug for a year versus a newly diagnosed or a prevalent patient that just started the drug changes. So now into the 14th month of this drug, we're starting to look at persistency and adherence and the things that matter. So now we're going to be investing more into drug reminders and things like that, helping drive refills. So it changes. So now we address the prevalent patients. We're moving now into, hey, what are the incident patients need? What are the different needs for those patients? So you have to constantly evolve.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Naveed. And Jenna, I want to go to you. I just want to go to Jennifer real quick. Jennifer, what's interesting is, so Naveed it's a little more on the digital side in how he's supporting his patients. Yours is more on the human side, but then you added this digital kind of element to it. So how is that being received now from your patient base?
Well, it's in implementation phase right now, so we haven't fully executed.
Isn't that perfect for what we're talking about here?
Well, we haven't fully executed the tool.
Yeah, okay.
We're building it right now. But I can tell you that it's not just in response to, hey, I need a new way to communicate that's more convenient, and easier and faster for me. It's also being able to serve up some of our messages, to our customers, right, in a new way. And also some of our marketing tools. For example, we have a care tracker on the rare side where we ask caregivers, please make sure that you're tracking any tolerability issues that your child is experiencing, and even more importantly, all the efficacy and improvements that you're seeing in your child. Please keep track of it within this care tracker. That'll help you talk to your HCP, it'll help you keep track and remember, all those things. And we're able to actually serve up now this care tracker within the digital tool, I hope, if it works, within the digital tool as well. So now that's a new way to kind of motivate the caregiver to fill this out and do that. And then we get the data, right? So we have a line of sight to these insights and data that the caregivers are putting within the tool. So I'm very hopeful that this is going to be a great tool, not just for our patients and caregivers, but also for us as an organization as we look to continue to assess and figure out how we can best support our families. So fingers crossed.
Wonderful. Well, you've learned a bunch of best practices here, right? And you revealed them, so I think that's great. Well, thank you. Jenna, what are your thoughts?
Well, I had a follow-up question for them. Since like a year in planning, adverse event monitoring in open text in apps is always a hot topic. Like, what have you put into place and what are you planning to?
Yeah, we've had to train our partners that develop the app on our pharmacovigilance requirements. So we have to track that. And if there is an AE that's reported, we have to follow the standards on when and how to report those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
good
Were
question.
you concerned that you were going to get too many AEs because of that? Was that a concern kind of upfront during
No,
implementation?
it was just standard protocol. We had to do it. There was no concern.
Good, okay.
Yeah, and I'm not a compliance or legal person, and you'd always want to work with your compliance folks to figure out what's appropriate within your own organization. But, some things that I've done in the past is when texting, just have standard texting templates, right, that have been approved. Or enabling one-way texting, right, where maybe an HCP can text you, but then you pick up the phone and you call them back. So, those are some ways to get around it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great.
Good thoughts.
Okay.
The thing that jumped out to me is, listening to all these different groups over the years, there's a lot of groups that are heavily human, and then there's a lot of groups that are heavily digital. And you both kind of talked about both, especially you, Jennifer, having more of a hybrid, but looking at your vendor that you're going to partner with, and can they pivot if you need? So if in plan A you're thinking we're going to go fully human, could they add digital when we need that? Or if we're going to go really digital forward, could they add human when we need that? So having those groups that can do both and can pivot, so you don't have to go do a full rip and replace, but more so can work with the different partners you have in place to add, which is one of the things I found that Momentum does really well.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jenna. We just have a few minutes. We want to leave a few minutes for questions. I want to ask a quick question for everyone. We launched the program. We want to see that we want to make sure we're kind of being successful right up front. What are some of those leading indicators that you think from a patient support standpoint that we need to be looking at right upon launch? Are we looking at engagement? Are we looking at volume of patients that are opted in? What are your thoughts, Jen?
I think it's all of it, right? I mean, it's first of all, the volume of patients that are coming in, and is it meeting or hopefully exceeding our expectations? I mean, that's a start. Secondly, how quickly, are we servicing them? So turnaround time is huge, particularly at a launch when you don't necessarily know how payers are going to react. I mean, there's only so much prep you can do with the payers to figure out and say, okay, I think this is what's going to happen, but now let's, roll the dice and see what happens. So we don't know how quickly the payers are going to cover, how they're going to cover, what type of utilization controls they're going to have in place. So again, that turnaround time for each segment of everything that we're doing in service of the patient is going to be really important. The conversion that I talked about, how quickly are we getting a script and converting it into a new patient start? And then again, the customer satisfaction and how are our HCPs and patients reacting to the services that we've put forward, and is this meeting their needs, and are they happy with the relationship that they're building with our patient services folks? And then persistency comes later, but you want to start monitoring that, from the get-go, and see if you can make improvements over time would be a key indicator of success.
Thank you.
Yeah, everything she said.
Right?
However, I would just add that it's going to be imperative to ensure, like when you go specific on the KPIs on the payer side, especially with a new molecular entity, that time to first fill is going to be important because, and having that tight connection with market access is going to be important. Your payer account executive team, because if there are certain programs that aren't covering our formulary you don't have, you want to make sure you're proactive to that. The title of this discussion is patient engagement. I will say though that timing is going to be important because if you start trying to measure engagement too early, I think you run the risk again of overcorrecting because let's face it, at the time of diagnosis, you are getting calls from pharmacies, hubs, talking to the nurses, the offices. You might be competing a lot more early on with the engagement, and by thinking, hey, my engagement's low, I think you could be running that risk of overcorrecting. But Jennifer's point was a good one because if the HCP reaction is one that I would probably focus a little bit more on in the early days. Are they willing to prescribe? Why are they not willing to prescribe? Do they have knowledge? And tomorrow at 11:30, we'll talk a little bit about the awareness programs and how to amplify that. What's the level of education that they have? So I think these are all important things. The one thing about adherence that I would just add for people to think about is often we fall into this is like thinking about adherence in terms of how compliant they are, they're taking it the right, how long their DOT is. Also, keep in mind, adherence is connected also to abandonment rate. So depending, like I won't talk about it from my disease state that we service, but many of you probably have to deal with abandonment rate as well. You get the script and then the patient doesn't fill the script. That's also an adherence challenge as well, which is somewhat upfront more in that patient journey.
You know, it's setting those expectations up front. So just at the beginning of what you said, where you want to measure early, but you just don't, it depends on when you act upon that, right? That's a really important thing. And it's setting those expectations within your organization, all that kind of stuff, that you're not being pressured to make these changes so quickly.
Correct.
So thank you for that point. We're going to close up our Q&A here. I want to thank you guys so much. Really great. That was wonderful. And let's open it up to questions. Does anyone have any questions for our panel? Sorry to have you walk.
That's true, you could.
Thank you so much. This was super interesting. So you talked a lot about your digital engagement strategies. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you're thinking about staying ahead with AI. Specifically, how are you thinking about evolving your programs to incorporate AI? But also, how are you thinking about payers and how payers are leveraging AI and how you need to stay ahead of that?
Do you want me to take the AI and then for the digital app and maybe you talk about the payers? Does that make sense, or do you?
You go ahead and get started, and I'll
So one of the
think.
great question, by the way, with regards to how we're leveraging AI. One of the things, having spent some time at a larger organization prior to coming to Servier, we had welcome calls for patients that start their duration of therapy. And during those calls, we did these things called motivational interviewing. There's an opportunity to leverage AI at that onset of that patient interaction, where you can actually profile how patients are based on certain things like, you know, age, employment, marital status, those types of questions, which will allow us to make a determination on when those meaningful intervention points are. So one patient might have a higher risk of not fulfilling their refills. So you reach out to that patient maybe 15 to 20 days before that refill. So you can actually, you know, use AI technology to categorize patients as maybe high, medium, or low risk. So I think that's a low-hanging fruit. That's something we're exploring now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm thinking about how to respond because, you know, I'll be humble and say that I am super old school, and AI is something that I have tried to stay away from as much as possible, knowing that I can't avoid it. I have to face it, you know, straight on, and we as an organization have to face it. And in fact, just this year, you know, we've recognized that we're behind the times in AI, and we've put together an AI task force within our organization to really tackle specifically from a commercial lens how each functional area can leverage AI and benefit from it. But that work stream has just kicked off, and we're really in the infantile stages, but I'm hopeful that I'll personally learn a lot and my organization will, and that next year we'll be able to start building out the tools that we need to really leverage AI in the right way. So,
And at Momentum, we're really thinking about the efficiencies for those on the phone. So have a sidekick that's AI, so that they can see, you know, what was the last call like? When they're getting on the phone, they're prepped more because they can see the summaries of the last conversations with that patient. They can think through next best action and actually spend less time thinking about next best action because that's being served up to them. So they can spend more time connecting with the patient and less time, you know, making decisions that are simple and can be made for them, and summarizing those calls and giving them the key points. We actually had someone the other day who was like, first I thought it was wrong, and then I listened back to the call. I was like, oh, that was. So when you're on the call listening, it's harder to pick up all those small details.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Any other questions? We have one here in the middle.
Hey everyone, Manny from ConnectMed 360. Question on, you guys talked about implementing patient engagement programs, some of the people aspect of it, right? What are some of your philosophies or best practices as you look at staffing? Naveed, you talked about the pent-up demand there for patients too, right? How do you look at launching with FRMs, hubs, right? What your people aspect is there, and then as they kind of cascades to your, post-launch, that people aspect too.
So
Do you want to repeat the question?
Yeah, because there's some, you were in and out.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You want me to repeat
If you
that?
don't mind
on
repeating,
stage,
yeah.
yeah.
So as you look at your pre-launch for implementing for staffing for the people aspect of it, what's your philosophy or best practice on your pre-launch versus your post, whether it's FRMs, hubs, internal folks there? What are some philosophies you guys are looking at?
I can try to
Yeah,
start.
that'd be great.
And
Yeah.
again, I didn't catch all of it, but I think I got it. So I firmly believe in field access, field reimbursement, whatever we're calling them, the FRMs in that model. Both in support of HCPs, of course, from a reimbursement and access perspective, but also in support of patients, caregivers, and families, and having a presence in the field that can also support the patient. So I'm a huge advocate of that for all the products I work on today and certainly into the future, and having a strong connection between our patient-facing teams, our HCP-facing teams, or some teams that face with both, and our hub, and making sure that at the hub, we're building the right infrastructure to support those field folks, right? So having the human connection, right? So I've got my contact at the hub, and that's my person within my territory that's gonna help me kind of figure things out and work the cases. But also with the technology side, and probably a lot of us are aware when we're working with external partners, we're sometimes having to leverage their portals and their systems in order to gain information, and making sure that we're setting up those systems in the right way to best support our field access teams. And in some cases, I've had to actually build my own CRM, my own technology platform in support of my field access members, because maybe my partner or vendor's technology wasn't enough to support them. So certainly open to doing something like that, but making sure that the entire ecosystem is talking to each other, the right hand is talking to the left hand, and that you build that connectivity between everybody from the get-go when launching the program.
Beautiful. Just
Yeah,
three
please.
things to quickly add. I know we're out of time, but I think you look at it from three areas around staffing. Number one, it's geography. So I think it's very important to understand where the concentration of your prescribers and patients would be, because it's different across different parts of the country, whether it's community-based or academic. I think the second thing is it's the handoff, right? Like within patient services, often we have to cross-collaborate with our MSLs as well as our territory sales managers where and when appropriate. And then the third thing is going back to digital. Our patients don't stop their demands and requests after 9 to 5. So if you have tools and resources that can allow patients to get connected, whether it's digitally or also with your hub partners or your SPs, so you have that after-hours support. So all your staffing is really dependent on, I think, those 3 or 4 things.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. Very much appreciate it. And thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.